Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. If I only had one raised bed, how would I plant it for the fall? That's what I'm talking about on this video. So this is gonna be for anyone who is still wondering if they should plant for the fall, if they're concerned because they only have a little bit of space, if they only have a few pots, or if they only have one raised bed, this is the video for you. But if you have more space than that, then you still wanna watch this video because I'm gonna be sharing how I would design a raised bed for the fall and winter and what I would do to make sure that I had food all fall and winter long. So if you're brand new here, my name is Barbara. I live in Tennessee in Zone 7B. And I have been gardening now for the last 5 years. And I started this channel to inspire people just like you to grow more food. I'm all about the home garden, making sure that you are taking care of your family in a sustainable way. And that means growing your own food, doing food preservation, doing your own DIY, making your own stuff at home from scratch, as well as all of the other things that we talk about on this channel. And so I'm glad that you're here. If you are new, please say hello in the comments and tell me what state or country you're coming in from. And if you've been here before, I appreciate you for keep coming back to my channel. But I'm excited about today's video. And we really don't we don't have to be outside for this topic because I'm gonna be doing more talking and showing you a demonstration. I will try to explain things as thoroughly as possible. So that's okay. The rain ain't got nothing on us. We can still talk about this content. And y'all, look, I went above and beyond because I drew it up. Okay, I'm not just talking about it. I really put some thought into if I only had one raised bed for the fall and winter, what would I plant and why? And so I'm going to walk you through the thought process of how you should be thinking about planting your fall garden. Not that yours will look just like mine, but I want you to be intentional about what you plant and think through it ahead of time. But yeah, y'all, we got pictures. Okay? So I'm gonna have a seat at the table so that we can sit down and chit chat about the fall garden. So if you're brand new to me, we are fortunate to have a lot of space. So we live on 77 acres of land. And so I have plenty of space to garden. I have 3 main garden spaces, one that is behind me here, which is my backyard. I have 5 raised beds back there. And then I also have a high tunnel that's 30 by 96. And so we have 6 raised beds in there as well as 5 in-ground rows that are about 45 feet long. And that is where we do our fall and winter gardening. And then we also have an in-ground space that's 4,000 square feet where we have 100-foot rows. And so we have plenty of space to garden. Now, it did not start off that way in terms of me having all those spaces when I started year 1. I only had 4 raised beds my first fall and winter gardening. And I think I only gardened in maybe 2 of them, if I'm not mistaken. I really don't remember. But I don't think that I did. I'm pretty sure I didn't do all 4. I think I only did 2. So I want to talk about if I only had one raised bed. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because I think sometimes we hang up the stuff for the summer and we're like, okay, I'm done. I don't really have the infrastructure. I'm not in the best climate to do gardening in the fall and winter, or I don't know what to do and I don't have enough space. I only got this 1 or 2 raised beds. And so, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do anything for the fall. And that is certainly okay if you want to take a rest break, no problem. But I don't want you to take a break thinking that you can't do fall and gardening. If you're gonna take a break, I want you to be well informed that yes, I could grow food, but I'm choosing not to, okay? I don't want you to be mistaken at all. Everybody can grow food in the fall and winter. Now, when it comes to climate, geography, and zones, I'm in zone 7B. And so when it comes to zones, the thing that matters is what is your average lowest minimum temperature, and then also you want to know what is your estimated first frost date, okay? So when I'm talking about the things that you can plant, primarily this is going to be relevant to all of you, but especially for zones 6 through 10, 100%, right? So the things I'm going to talk about is that anybody can be planting for the fall and winter, and we're going to talk about why that is, but then also how you can extend it into the winter season, depending on where you are, by just some simple measures like using some row cover or things like that. Or we can talk about other ways that you can cover things, even if you don't want to invest in row cover, okay? So one of the things that I love to inspire people when it comes to growing food is that a lot of people think, well, I got to have all of this land, I got to have all of this space. And really, you can grow in a 2 feet of space. How can you grow in 2 feet of space? You can use a GREENSTALK, right? So I've talked many times on my channel about the GREENSTALK vertical gardening system. That only takes 2 feet of space, and you can grow many of these things that I'm talking about, if not all of them, in your GREENSTALK. So if you're watching this on the day that this video came out, I want to at least put a reminder in here that the Labor Day sale for GREENSTALK that they're having ends tomorrow on September the 2nd. And so right now they have launched a brand new color called Blackberry, and then they brought a color back called Terracotta. Both colors and all of the products in those colors are 25% off. That ends tomorrow. But there's more. You can use my code LFF10 for an extra $10 off. An extra $10 off, okay? So if you want to garden vertically and you only have 2 feet of space, that could be a patio, that could be a deck, that could be, you know, a little walkway off your apartment, a townhouse, whatever. You don't need a lot of space to continue to grow food, okay? And I think the way these prices are set up in the grocery store, everybody should be growing at least something, because that's one less thing that you have to buy, and that's one more thing that you know what is the quality of the food that you're eating because you grew it yourself, okay? So I'm an advocate. If you come into this channel trying to get you a way to not grow food, not the channel for you. But if you want to learn how to grow food and you want to be inspired and know how to do it intentionally, then this is the place to be. I would love for you to go ahead and click the subscribe button in faith if you are new. But let's get into this topic about if I only had one raised bed, what would I do? Right? This is what I would do, but I want to give you a framework so that way when I show you how I've laid mine out, you can just plug and play and say, yeah, she would put this right here, but instead of that, I'm gonna put this right here. Does that make sense? Okay, let's jump into it. So I kind of brought this, put this into 5 different categories of the types of things that you can grow in the fall and winter, okay? So that's root crops, leafy greens, herbs, flowers, and brassicas. That's how I categorize it into those 5 categories. And so I'm gonna have at least one from each in my one raised bed. Okay, just like that, y'all, we outside. The rain literally rained for like, I don't know, 5 minutes. And I guess it decided it wanted to go somewhere else. And that's okay with me. Now the sun came out right behind it, but that's okay. It's still like 80 to 85. So it is bearable and we can continue on. So I wanted to at least show you outside if I could, because I want to give you an example of what I mean when I say a raised bed. My beds are 4 by 8. You can see my raised beds back here behind me, and you can see they are full of still the summer crops, and we are harvesting them up into the last minute. But this bed is, these beds are all 4 by 8. And so when I say, here's what I would plant in one raised bed, this is what I mean. Literally, y'all, if I had nothing else but this one raised bed that I could garden in this fall and winter, this is how I would set it up. Okay. If I only had one raised bed, this is how I would set it up. And so the 5 categories, again, are the root crops, the leafy greens, the herbs, the flowers, and the brassicas. So let's talk about root crops. And so when you're talking about growing a fall and winter garden, your root crops are going to be things like your carrots, your beets, and your radishes. These are really good to grow in the fall and winter because they can withstand very, very low temperatures. Like they can eat, like carrots can withstand up to like 0 degrees, like literally. And so if you think about it, they're almost like the ground is like their storage space. Like many people will just harvest their carrots when they're ready in the fall and winter and just come grab them one by one as they need them individually versus harvesting them all at one time. They actually use the raised bed or the container, the ground, as the storage just because they're perfectly okay when it comes to frost. Now, if you live in an area where it is sustained frost and ice and snow, I have seen, again, we only have snow, 3-4 inches a winter, so we're not in an area that gets constant snow, but my carrots have survived in snow, again, especially if they're already well established. So definitely look up in your area what is the lowest temperature that it gets. But if your area gets to like 0 degrees here and there, you can definitely grow carrots, beets, and some types of radishes. Now, the radishes that I typically grow are daikon radish, so they're going to be on the bigger side. and they take a little bit longer. But if you're growing traditional radishes like the red radishes, they only take like 25 or 30 days. You could actually plant a few of those every single week. Like, I wouldn't personally plant a whole row of radishes, but if you have a little spot in your raised bed, you can pop 5 or 6 in there every week or so, and just succession sow those. So every week, every fall, during the fall and winter, you have radishes to harvest. That is definitely an option. So when it comes to root crops, carrots, beets, radishes, things like that, you can plant all of those things or one of those things and all of that. So that's one category that I want you to think about. The second category is, think about your leafy greens. And that is stuff like lettuce, arugula, and spinach, right? When it comes to lettuce, most lettuces, now you have lettuces that are heat tolerant and you have lettuces that are more cold tolerant. Most lettuces, though, that you are going to buy, excuse me, are going to be for the cool season, right? Lettuce is primarily a cool season crop. They have some lettuces that are heat tolerant, but ideally lettuce tastes better in cool temperatures. And lettuce is usually good without any covering up until 20 degrees. So for a lot of you, you can start you some lettuce today. On the first day of September, you can start you some lettuce, and you will be harvesting lettuce by mid-October, well before, it gets 20 degrees in your area. Now, in my area, the first frost is estimated to be around October 19th. Our first frost is going to be like a 30-degree night. That's usually what our first frost looks like. It does not get to like 20 degrees here on a consistent basis until maybe December or January. And so if I planted lettuce today, I could have lettuce for the next 2 to 3 months easily, right? And so that is a great crop to grow. It's also great for your GREENSTALK. It's great for containers. And again, if I had one raised bed, you better believe I'm going to have me some lettuce in there. And so arugula is another one that's very similar to lettuce. And then also you have spinach. Spinach can be a little bit more cold hardy than lettuce. And so that is another one in the leafy green category, okay? So we've talked about our root crops, we've talked about our leafy greens. And again, going back to the GREENSTALK, if you were planting in a GREENSTALK, the lettuce, the arugula, and the spinach could all grow in there beautifully during the fall and the winter. And when it comes to the root crops, you could also do the carrots, the beets, and the radishes in your GREENSTALK. I would pick one, again, for the carrots, beets, and radishes. If you have an original, which is the bigger tiers, I would do that for the carrots, beets, and radishes, or the root crops. And then I would use my leaf planter, the smaller containers, for the leafy greens. Okay, that's what I would do. Now let's talk about herbs. Now you may say, well, I ain't got but one raised bed, Barbara. I need food. I don't need herbs. And that, you know what? You don't have to have herbs, but I want to give you the option just in case, because many times people don't realize that there are certain herbs that grow really, really well in the winter. If you do a lot of cooking like me and you're in the kitchen and you're already buying dried herbs, it makes sense for you to grow your own herbs. Instead of you buying a jar of dried basil or Italian seasoning or things like that for $4 or $5, you can grow your own and have plenty of it for the same price or cheaper. So when it comes to herbs that really thrive in the fall and winter, you're going to be thinking about things like parsley, rosemary, thyme, cilantro. Yes, cilantro. Many of you planted cilantro this summer and you're like, oh, my cilantro went to seed, it bolted in June. That is because cilantro is a cool season crop. It is not a warm season crop. I know we want it to be warm season because at the same time, we're doing our tomatoes and our peppers and we want to have our little salsa garden. But honey, cilantro does not like anything above 80 degrees. And so if your cilantro failed this summer, this is the time to plant it, okay? So those are herbs that you can do. Cilantro, thyme, rosemary, parsley. That's just to name a few. But also sage, if you're in zone 7 or above, does really well in the winter. Also oregano does well in the winter as well. So think about herbs as well. The next thing I want to talk about are flowers. And you may be thinking, now I really ain't got space for flowers if I only have one raised bed. I'm trying to max it out with food. And you know what? You don't have to do flowers. But what I will tell you is, for me, because again, remember, we're talking about my raised bed. Because I'm going to show you what my raised bed is going to look like if I only had one. But I'm giving you options so that you can plug and play. for your raised bed. If you were to draw a square on your paper, then you can plug and play however you want. Given what I told you. So if you don't want flowers, you don't have to have them. But I do encourage flowers for a couple of reasons. One is for companion planting. I would not do a raised bed with what I know right now with just vegetables. I always try to have vegetables, herbs, and flowers in my raised beds as like a triangular companion planting system. I just made that up. TPS, a triangular planting system. You know, do I need to call the patent office? I might be on to something, y'all. I just made that up. But anyway, let me calm down. Okay, listen. Vegetables, herbs, and flowers in one bed is what I try to do in most of my raised beds. An exception to that would be like if you see over here my sweet potatoes. It's just sweet potatoes in those beds. I don't have anything else in those beds just because the sweet potatoes kind of need all the space, and whatever I had in there would be crowded out by the sweet potato vines, right? When I do my onions and garlic, there are usually singular crops in there. But everything else that I'm growing, I have vegetables, herbs, and flowers. So in these raised beds that you see behind me here, I have a flower. You can see that beautiful zinnia. I have some herbs in there. I have some thyme. And then I also have like green beans and peppers. So again, that's just evidence of the triangular planting system. Okay. So when it comes to flowers, here are flowers that do really, really well in the winter in zones 7 and above, specifically alyssum, calendula. Calendula likes cool temperatures. Now, calendula is good to about 25 degrees, okay? And so calendula, we did it in the spring, but as soon as it got hot, my calendula started to die off because it doesn't like hot temperatures. It really thrives in like 65 to 70 degree weather, but it is good up until 25 degrees. So that's another one to try. Violas or pansies are great winter flowers as well. And then also snapdragons. Now for snapdragons, you're really going to be overwintering them, meaning you're going to put them in the ground now. And then when it comes to the spring, they're going to bloom and be beautiful. It's almost like a spring surprise, right? So that is an option as well. Now I'm giving you options, but when I get to my bed, you'll see that I'm intentional if I only had one bed about what I'm going to plant. And I'm going to explain why that is and what I choose to plant and why. Okay. And then the very last category are brassicas. So brassicas are things like your broccoli, your cabbage, your cauliflower, your kale, your bok choy, your Brussels sprouts. Those are what we call our brassicas. So that is the fifth category that you need to be thinking about when it comes to if you only had one raised bed or one container or two containers or three containers that would be equivalent of one raised bed. Okay. Now, obviously, if you have more space than that, then the sky is higher for you than those with just one raised bed, right? I was going to say the sky is the limit, but if you have more space, then obviously you can build off that. But I'm talking to the person that only has limited space or doesn't know a way to think about what to plant. Okay, so we've talked about root crops, leafy greens, herbs, flowers, and brassicas. I've given you some in each category. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to draw a square on your paper like I did. All I did was draw a rectangle, not a square, a rectangle to mimic what my raised bed looks like. And then what I did was I went to each category and I picked, well, Barbara, what would you want if this was just your only raised bed? And that is how I designed this. So I want you to do the exact same thing. So I don't know if you can see this well, but let me just walk you through if I had one raised bed, what I would do. So in the corners, the four corners, I'm always going to usually put some type of flower or herb. Typically, if I'm doing a one raised bed type of situation, right? And so in two of my corners, I have flowers, and in two of my corners, I have herbs. So when it comes to flowers, now for me, the flower is non-negotiable. One, because I love flowers. Two, I know the benefit. And then three, I love to see pretty things. And so when I walk out to my garden in the winter or in the fall, I prefer not to see just green. Now, green is a sign of life, and green means I got food. But I love to see color. And the way that I get color in my garden in the fall and winter is to have some type of flower. So for me, I am going to do an alyssum and calendula. That is the flowers that I would choose for this space. So when I'm choosing flowers for my raised bed, I am going to choose alyssum And alyssum comes in a pretty white, and then I also have like a pastel color alyssum. So I would probably do both of those. So the white is going to be nice against all of the green vegetables in my raised bed, but then also that those pastel colors are going to look good as well in a corner. And then also I would do some violas and calendula. So in two of my corners, I'm probably going to have alyssum, the white alyssum and the pastel alyssum. And then in another corner, I could have violas, because they're going to be pretty and purple and pink. And then in the other category, I could have calendula, because I would do calendula again because the flowers are pretty, but also I have a purpose. So the thing that I would not do if I only had one raised bed, I wouldn't do the snapdragon. I would not do the snapdragons if I only had one raised bed, because again, the snapdragons are extra, meaning for me, I do that so that I can have them in the spring, right? It's not necessary. I don't eat the snapdragons. It's just for beauty. So if I only had one raised bed, then the flowers I'm going to choose are things that I can see right now. The alyssum, the violas, the calendula. If my purpose is to see something beautiful and colorful in the fall and winter. So that's why the snapdragons would go off of my list if I only had one raised bed. The other reason that I would put calendula on there is because I can use calendula. Calendula is medicinal. And so I make calendula salve that you can buy on our website, right? And then we use around the house. Calendula is like nature's Neosporin. So if you have a tube of Neosporin in your first aid kit, calendula can be replaced. Can replace the Neosporin. It does the exact same thing. It's great for insect bites, stings, and things like that. And so again, I can use the calendula, so that's going to trump. So if I could only put one flower, I would do calendula, and I would get rid of the alyssum and the violas and the snapdragon. So I want you to see how I'm thinking about that. So again, the primary purpose is to grow food, right? And things that we can use. And so if I could only do one flower, then I would choose calendula because it has a multi-purpose. One, it's going to make me happy because it's pretty, but also I can use it medicinally. But since I have four corners and I can put all of those flowers in there, then I'm going to at least do the calendula, the alyssum, and the violas. So that's what I would put if I only had one raised bed. The other thing I want to talk about are herbs. So if I was choosing herbs for my one raised bed, again, I would put herbs in the corner or maybe like in the center or something like that in terms of placement. And for me, I would do rosemary for sure and cilantro. If I was limited on space, then those are the two herbs that I would pick. For me, I use rosemary in many different uses, medicinally as well as culinary. And then cilantro, I use a ton of cilantro when I'm making salsa. We freeze dry it and we grow enough to last us the whole year. And so cilantro is in several dips, salad dressings, salsas, and things that I use. And so I use it way more readily than I do parsley. Again, I could grow parsley, but if I'm limited on space, I'm going to pick the things, again, that I use more often than not. And so for me, the two herbs that I would be picking are cilantro and rosemary. And again, I don't know if you can see that here, but I have it on my paper. The sun is like really, really beaming. So I keep trying to find me a space that is where you guys can see me. Okay, I keep moving around because the sun is like literally just jumping and beaming and moving. It's hard to sometimes shoot video when the sun is this bright, but we're going to try to keep pressing on. So again, I am picking the things that I use, and there is a method to the madness, okay? So we've done our flowers, we've done our herbs. So now let's talk about what leafy greens I'm going to do. So in the leafy green category, I gave you spinach, lettuce, and arugula. So for me, if I only had one raised bed, I'm going to do lettuce and I'm going to do spinach, because of how my family uses it. So for lettuce, I can do salads and we can put it on sandwiches. We use a ton of lettuce. And so that is going to be a crop for me that I'm going to need to have in the fall and winter and not have to go to the store and buy. And then when it comes to spinach, we can cook that fresh. We can eat it raw and mix it in with salad as a spring mix. And we freeze it for smoothies all throughout the year. So again, that is one of the things of how I'm picking. For me, I would not pick arugula because I'm not a big fan of arugula. And so if I only had one raised bed, I'm not putting arugula in my one raised bed. I'm going to fill that up with more lettuce. The other reason, again, why you want to have a leafy green or something like that is because lettuce is cut and come again, meaning you can cut you know, the leaves of it off, and then it's going to keep regrowing leaves. You would not take the whole head of lettuce up. You're just going to cut the outer leaves, harvest the outer leaves, and then the lettuce is going to grow back. So literally it's like a, not a perennial in the true sense, but it's going to be not a one-time deal. I can have lettuce all throughout the fall and the winter just based on the 2 or 3 lettuces that I may plant in my one raised bed. The same thing with spinach. The spinach is going to keep growing back. Also, spinach is very hardy. Lettuce is good to 20 degrees. Spinach is hardy to 20 degrees. And then with some row cover, it can last even longer. Okay. So in my raised bed, I don't know if you can see it, but I have some lettuce in right there. Okay. Next on the list are our root crops. So for me, I told you carrots, beets, and radishes are in the root crop family. There's some other things like turnips and things like that maybe you can do for root crops, but I don't eat turnips. So for me, what I'm putting in my one raised bed would be carrots. If I have some extra space, then I would throw in some radishes, because for radishes, I can put them in salads, and I can also roast them in the oven with other vegetables or eat just is. So I have a dual purpose. For beets, the jury is still out on me liking beets. I really only want beets for beet powder, but if I only had one raised bed, that's out the window, right? I got to use the things that are more, and carrots we can use for many different things. Raw in salads, we can use them cooked as a vegetable. We can use it for carrot cake, and carrots store a long time. So I get a double, triple benefit, right? Versus if I want to do something else, again, I'm doing things that are long lasting. So in my bed, I have carrots. And the nice thing about carrots is that you can interplant those. Interplant means kind of what it says. You put things in between other crops. So you can have a row of kale, and then in between the kale, you can have carrots, because the carrots are going to grow down in the ground. The kale is going to grow above the ground. And so it's not going to be competing for space per se. And you can maximize your space by interplanting carrots in between if you only have one raised bed. So because I have multiple raised beds, I do a whole bed of carrots, rows and rows and rows. But if I only had one raised bed, I would still have me some carrots in there, and I would just interplant them. Okay. The last category are brassicas. So this is the category that has your cauliflower, your broccoli, your Brussels sprouts, your cabbage, and things like that. Now for me, if I only had one raised bed, I would not do those things like broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage, because it's a one-time crop. Once you harvest the head of cabbage, that's it. Once you harvest the head of broccoli, that's it. You'll get some side shoots, but it's not enough for a meal. Once you harvest the cauliflower, that is it. And so for me, I would not waste the space in my garden if I only had one raised bed for that kind of stuff. I would do kale and bok choy. Kale is also a leafy green, but it's really in the brassica family. And so I would do kale, because I use kale in many ways. You can put kale, you can freeze kale for smoothies, which we do. You can freeze kale to put in soups, which we do. You can use kale raw as a kale salad, which we do. And then you can also steam, saute, and cook kale as a vegetable on top of the stove, which we do. So kale is multi-purpose, and kale is very hardy and can last all fall and winter long. It is good to in the teens. Kale is, and kale is going to taste better in the fall and winter. It's going to be more tender, more sweet, and all of those things than when you grow it in the spring. So kale would definitely be a brassica that I would grow. The other brassica I would grow is bok choy. The reason why I would do bok choy and not cabbage is because bok choy, one, has a smaller footprint. It's not going to be as big as cabbage in terms of taking up space. Also, bok choy only takes 45 days. So I can have multiple bok choy. So even though cabbage is a one-time crop and bok choy is a one-time crop, I can get 2 bok choys to 1 cabbage in a time frame. Cabbage is going to take for me about 90 days on average, maybe 100, right? Because as the temperature starts to decrease and you're not getting as much sun, it just takes a little bit longer. Bok choy I can grow in 45 to 50 days. So that means I can have 2 successions of bok choy. So even though it's a one-time crop, it's going to take up less space, and I can do multiple of those, and I can use it similarly to cabbage. I can saute it and eat it, and Asian stir fries and things like that. I can mix it with greens like collard greens. We've done that before, and that's really good. Or I can steam it whole if I do the baby bok choy, and we can have that as a side vegetable. So there's many things that I can do, and plus it's It's very similar to cabbage, so I kind of get my cabbage feel, even though it's not a true head of cabbage. So that is how I would design my raised bed, y'all. And so in my bed that, oh, the other thing that I didn't say, I'm sorry, I left one thing off, and that is collard greens. Y'all know, if you've been here, you know that I love collard greens. So collard greens have to be in my raised bed. And so I can do, let's just say 6 or 7 collard greens in one row in my raised bed. And the thing about collard greens is they are very frost hardy. Very frost hardy. They can last below 20 degrees easily, right? And they're going to taste really good. And I can do collard greens and I can have them last all throughout, at least until February. And so I get long lasting greens. And again, you harvest them and they're going to come back. You harvest them, they're going to come back. So I can have collard greens on my dinner table many times throughout the fall and winter season, just because of how they grow, and they're very hardy. So now we're back inside. So I don't know if you can see this, but basically what I have is I have my flowers and herbs in the corner. I have collard greens right here. One thing that I didn't talk about are bunching onions. That is another thing that you can do if you have space and you really enjoy bunching onions, is to put those in your raised bed, because they're going to take up very little space, and you can also interplant those like you do the carrots. Okay. And so I have the flowers, I have the herbs in the corner, I have collard greens, and then in between my collard greens, I show that I'm doing carrots. I'm interplanting. Okay. Then I have lettuce, I have bok choy, and I have cilantro. In between that, I have some radishes. And then on the very last row, I have kale and I have spinach. So if I only had one raised bed, that is what I would grow. And y'all think about that. In terms of eating, I have collard greens, I have bok choy, and I have kale and spinach. Like, those are 4 vegetables that I could eat as a side or dinner or something like that. Then I have lettuce that I can use for salads and sandwiches. I have cilantro that's that I can last me for the whole year. I can grow it, grows easily. I can freeze dry it for the entire year. And then I have carrots that are gonna store up to a year. If you don't know that you can store carrots, I have a whole video on how I've stored carrots for up to a year in my refrigerator in cold storage. And then I have the herbs that I can season my food with. So y'all, it don't take much. It does not take much. This is what I would do if I only had one raised bed. Now, I want to know, what would you do if you only had one raised bed? And I hope that you can take this and you can apply it to, if I had a container. Let me look on the list. Is there anything that won't grow in a container? So the things that are best for containers: carrots, beets, radishes, lettuce, spinach, cilantro, all the herbs, great. Flowers, great. When it comes to your brassicas, your kale and collard greens, you can do those in a container, but I would have a pretty big one, especially for your collard greens, because they have a big root system. But most of all this other stuff you can put in a container. If you just have pots and stuff around your house, then you could do that as well. But if you got one raised bed, you have no excuse. You can plant a ton of stuff. One more thing I want to talk about, I just remembered, because we came inside, I lost my train of thought. But let's talk about, how do you extend it into the winter season? So the things that I talked about, most of these things are good up until 20 degrees. So if you live in an area that is consistently below 20 degrees and you run into really, really cold weather, a couple of things that you can do is, one, you can build you a very inexpensive hoop house-like situation. So you can take some PVC pipe and put it over your raised bed, and then you can put some, excuse me, row cover or agricultural fabric over it. I've shown that before in my video, and that is going to insulate it, and it's going to let your crops last longer, because it's going to protect them from the frost and the wind and the cold. So that is an option to extend even when it's below 20 degrees, is just to throw the cover over that. So that is definitely an option that you can do. The second thing that you can do is, if you don't have PVC pipe, that would be ideal, is the PVC pipe and the agricultural fabric or row cover. But if you don't have that, you can lay old sheets, you can lay old towels. I have seen people put a laundry basket, you know, the roof part, you know, on the sides it has like slats, but the top of the bottom of the laundry basket, which would be the roof in this situation, is flat and covered. You can cover that over your crops. I have seen many things. I have put sheets on my stuff to protect it. That is not ideal, but it does work. And the reason why it's not ideal, because ideally you don't want the fabric touching your plants. You just wanted to kind of be over it to help insulate it better. But have I done those things when I didn't have PVC pipe and row cover and or budget for all that? Yes, I did. So those were the ways that you can extend your season even further. Now, I hope that this was helpful. Let me know what questions you have below. Let me know if this opened your eyes to like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I can do this. I would love to hear it. I would love to hear it. Y'all, it's September. Fall is on its way. Let's welcome fall, right? For all you summer lovers, fall haters, fall is coming, okay? And we're going to let her come. We're going to let her come. I'm ready to kick summer in the throat because I like the cooler temperature. So fall is on its way. We can still garden. We can still have a good time, and we can still grow food. If you have a question, put it down below. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, please click subscribe up here. I'll pop some videos that you can watch between now and my next video. And I cannot wait to see you in the next video. Remember, this is all a journey. Let's grow together. I'll see you next time, friend.